Billionaire paralyzed with fear when secretary unearths damning evidence in company safe. The air in the Blackwood Towers executive suite hung heavy with tension. Jessica Parker's fingers trembled as she held the weathered manila folder, its contents threatening to spill out and shatter the carefully constructed world around her. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, darted between the damning documents and the ashen face of her boss, Marcus Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the muffled sounds of the bustling city below. What is this?" Marcus, the billionaire tycoon whose name graced the building itself, stood paralyzed. His usual commanding presence had evaporated, leaving behind a shell of a man, vulnerable and exposed. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he struggled to form words. "Jessica, I can explain," he finally managed, his voice cracking. But the panic in his eyes betrayed the futility of any explanation. The safe door gaped open behind Jessica, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. What had started as a routine search for an old contract had unearthed a Pandora's box of secrets. Photographs, ledgers, and handwritten notes spilled out, each page a damning indictment of the man Jessica had admired and served faithfully for years. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the opulent office. The golden light that usually signified the end of another successful day now felt like a spotlight, illuminating the dark underbelly of the Blackwood Empire. Jessica's mind raced. The evidence in her hands didn't just threaten the company, it had the power to destroy lives, including her own. Years of loyalty and hard work suddenly felt hollow, built on a foundation of lies and corruption. Marcus took a shaky step forward, his hand outstretched. "Give me the folder, Jessica," he pleaded, a hint of his usual authority creeping back into his voice. "You don't understand what's at stake here." But Jessica did understand. In that moment, as she clutched the folder to her chest, she realized that her entire world had shifted. The mentor she had looked up to, the man who had given her a chance when no one else would, now stood before her as a stranger. The weight of the decision before her was palpable. Expose the truth and watch the company crumble, or bury it and become complicit in whatever dark secrets these papers held. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the office, Jessica knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Jessica Parker's life had been a testament to resilience and determination. Orphaned at a young age, she had bounced from one foster home to another, carrying little more than a battered suitcase and an unwavering hope for a better future. It was during one of the darkest periods of her life, when she was just 16 and facing the prospect of aging out of the system, that fate intervened in the form of Marcus Blackwood. Marcus had been visiting a local community center as part of a PR campaign when he first encountered Jessica. Impressed by her intelligence and drive, he saw in her a reflection of his own past struggles. Against the advice of his board and legal team, Marcus made the unprecedented decision to become Jessica's guardian, offering her not just a home but a chance at a life she had only dreamed of. For Jessica, the transition from forgotten foster child to the ward of a billionaire was nothing short of surreal. The Blackwood mansion, with its marble floors and chandeliers, felt like a foreign land. But Marcus, despite his wealth and status, never made her feel like a charity case. He encouraged her education, fostered her talents, and eventually offered her a position within his company, where she quickly rose through the ranks to become his trusted secretary. Marcus Blackwood's own story was one of rags to riches, a narrative he had carefully cultivated over the years. Born into abject poverty, he often recounted tales of his childhood in the slums, of nights spent hungry and cold. His rise to success was portrayed as a combination of hard work, strategic thinking, and an unwavering moral compass, a story that inspired countless others and formed the cornerstone of the Blackwood brand. The Blackwood Corporation had humble beginnings as a small tech startup in Marcus's garage. Through a series of innovative products and shrewd business moves, It had grown into a global conglomerate with interests spanning technology, real estate, and energy. Marcus was hailed as a visionary, a self-made man who had never forgotten his roots. His philanthropic efforts, particularly in education and urban development, had earned him admiration and accolades. Yet, as Jessica would come to learn, success often casts a long shadow. Alexander Blackwood, Marcus's biological son, was a constant reminder of the complexities that came with great wealth and power. Born into privilege, Alexander had never known the hardships his father had endured. He was brilliant and charismatic, much like Marcus, but lacked the empathy and work ethic that had endeared his father to so many. From the moment Jessica entered their lives, there had been tension between her and Alexander. While Marcus saw Jessica as a kindred spirit, Alexander viewed her as an interloper, a threat to his birthright. As they grew older, their paths diverged further. Jessica threw herself into her work, earning respect through her diligence and skill. Alexander, on the other hand, seemed more interested in the trappings of wealth, luxury cars, exotic vacations, and tabloid romances. The contrast between Jessica and Alexander was stark, and it didn't go unnoticed within the company. Whispers circulated that Jessica was being groomed to take over the Blackwood empire, rumors that only fueled Alexander's resentment. Marcus, for his part, seemed oblivious to the growing animosity, or perhaps he chose to ignore it, focusing instead on the continued growth of his company. Blackwood Corporation's success story was one for the business textbooks. What had started in a garage had grown into a gleaming tower in the heart of the city, employing thousands and influencing global markets. The company's innovations in sustainable energy and smart technology had positioned it at the forefront of the fight against climate change, earning Marcus Blackwood a reputation as not just a business leader, but a world leader. For Jessica, the company had become more than just a workplace, it was a mission. She believed wholeheartedly in the vision Marcus had laid out, a future where technology and business could solve humanity's greatest challenges. Her dedication was unwavering, her loyalty absolute. She had gone from having nothing to being at the right hand of one of the most powerful men in the world, and she was determined to prove worthy of the faith Marcus had placed in her. But as she stood in Marcus's office, holding the folder that threatened to unravel everything, Jessica was forced to confront the possibility that the story she had believed in, the man she had idolized, might be built on a foundation of lies. The documents in her hands seemed to tell a different story, one of corruption, cover-ups, and callous disregard for the very people Blackwood Corporation claimed to help. The weight of this revelation was crushing. It wasn't just about a company or a fortune, it was about identity. Jessica had defined herself by her association with Blackwood, had seen her own rise as proof that the system could work, that goodness could prevail. Now she was faced with the possibility that she had been complicit in perpetuating a grand deception. As she looked at Marcus, his face a mask of fear and desperation, Jessica felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The man who had saved her, who had given her everything, now stood before her as a stranger. And in that moment, as the last light of day faded from the office, Jessica realized that the true test of her character was just beginning. The choices she would make in the coming days would not just determine the fate of Blackwood Corporation, but would define who she truly was and what she stood for. The silence in Marcus Blackwood's office was deafening. Jessica's hands trembled as she leafed through the documents, each page revealing a new layer of deceit. Financial records showed massive payoffs to government officials. Environmental reports were doctored, hiding the true impact of Blackwood's operations. There were even records of intimidation tactics used against whistleblowers and journalists. Mr. Blackwood, Jessica finally broke the silence. Her voice barely above a whisper, "What have you done?" Marcus slumped into his leather chair, the weight of his secrets visibly crushing him. "Jessica, you have to understand. The world isn't black and white. Sometimes to do good you have to bend the rules." Jessica's mind reeled. The man before her, the one she had idolized for years, suddenly seemed small and pathetic. Bend the rules? This goes far beyond bending rules. You've broken laws, destroyed lives." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "Everything I did for the greater good. Do you think we could have achieved all we have without making some compromises?" The word compromises hung in the air, bitter and acrid. Jessica thought of all the charity galas, the inspirational speeches, the glossy PR campaigns touting Blackwood's commitment to ethics. It all felt hollow now. "You always told me that integrity was non-negotiable," Jessica said, her voice gaining strength. "You said that's what set us apart from the rest. Was that all a lie too?" Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "It's not that simple, Jessica. You don't know what it's like to build something from nothing, to have the weight of thousands of employees on your shoulders. Sometimes you have to make hard choices." Jessica's mind flashed to the communities mentioned in the reports, the lives ruined by Blackwood's secret operations. And what about the people who suffered because of these hard choices? Did they get a say? Marcus's face hardened. "That's enough, Jessica. You're young, idealistic. You don't understand how the real world works. Now, hand over those documents. We can forget this ever happened." For a moment, Jessica hesitated. Her entire life, everything she had, she owed to this man. But as she looked at the evidence in her hands, she knew she couldn't just walk away. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I can't do that, Mr. Blackwood. This isn't right." Marcus's eyes flashed with anger, then fear. "Think about what you're doing, Jessica. Think about everything I've given you. Are you really willing to throw it all away?" Jessica felt a sudden urge to reach out to someone, anyone who might understand her dilemma. In that moment of desperation, she looked directly at Marcus and said, "You know, in times like these, I wish life had a subscribe button like those online channels. Just one click and you'd have all the answers, all the support you need." Marcus blinked, momentarily thrown by the odd statement. "What are you talking about?" Jessica shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. "Nothing, just thinking out loud. But Mr. Blackwood, this isn't about what you've given me. It's about what's right." Marcus's demeanor changed, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "You owe me everything, Jessica. Without me, you'd be nothing. Just another foster kid lost in the system. Is this how you repay my kindness?" The words stung, but Jessica stood her ground. "You taught me to stand up for what's right, to fight for justice. That's exactly what I'm doing now." Marcus moved closer, his imposing figure looming over Jessica. "And what do you think will happen if this gets out?" "The company will collapse. Thousands will lose their jobs. Is that what you want?" Jessica clutched the documents tighter. "What about the thousands who have already suffered because of these lies? Don't they deserve justice?" For a long moment they stood in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Then Marcus's shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to leave him. "You're right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I've lost my way. I never meant for it to go this far." Jessica felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over her. "It's not too late to make things right, Mr. Blackwood." As they stood there, the gravity of the situation settling around them, Jessica couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. It would be difficult, fraught with challenges and hard decisions, but she knew it was necessary. Looking at Marcus, she said softly, "You know, in moments like these, I'm reminded of what you always used to say: if you believe in something, you have to be willing to stand up for it, to fight for it. It's like pressing that subscribe button, you're committing to something bigger than yourself." Marcus nodded slowly, a glimmer of his old self shining through. "I did say that, didn't I? I guess it's time I lived up to my own words." As they began to discuss their next steps, both Jessica and Marcus knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but in that moment they had taken the first step towards redemption, towards doing what was right. The truth would come out, and the world would be watching to see what happened next. The following days passed in a blur of hushed conversations and sleepless nights. Jessica found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, torn between her loyalty to Marcus and her sense of moral obligation. She had always prided herself on her integrity, but now, faced with the stark reality of the situation, she realized that the line between right and wrong was far more blurred than she had ever imagined. As she sat at her desk, mechanically going through her daily tasks, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The weight of the secret she now carried seemed to radiate from her, and she found herself jumping at every unexpected sound, every lingering glance from a coworker. It was on the third day after her discovery that Alexander Blackwood made his move. Jessica was working late, the office eerily quiet save for the gentle hum of her computer. The sudden click of expensive shoes on marble flooring made her look up, her heart racing as Alexander's imposing figure filled her doorway. Working late again, Jessica Alexander's voice was smooth, almost musical, but there was an undercurrent of tension that set Jessica's nerves on edge. Such dedication. It's admirable, really. Jessica forced a smile, her hand instinctively moving to cover the files on her desk. Just catching up on some paperwork, Alexander. Was there something you needed? Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze sharp and calculating. Oh, I think there's something we both need, Jessica. A little chat. Without waiting for an invitation, he strode into the office, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded to Jessica like the ceiling of a tomb. Alexander perched on the edge of her desk, his proximity making Jessica lean back involuntarily. I couldn't help but notice, Alexander began, his tone conversational, that you and my father have been spending a lot of time in closed-door meetings lately. Anything interesting going on? Jessica's mind raced, searching for a plausible lie. Just some routine business matters. You know how your father likes to be thorough. Alexander's laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. Oh, I know all about my father's thoroughness, just as I know about certain documents that have recently come to light. The blood drained from Jessica's face. How could he know? She and Marcus had been so careful. Alexander leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Did you really think you could keep something like this from me, Jessica? I have eyes and ears everywhere in this company. It's my birthright, after all. Jessica's hands clenched into fists beneath her desk. I don't know what you're talking about, Alexander. Don't play dumb, Alexander snapped, his facade of friendliness evaporating. I know about the evidence you found. The corruption, the cover-ups, all of it, and I know you're trying to decide what to do with it. Jessica's mind reeled. If Alexander knew, who else might be aware? What do you want, she asked, her voice barely audible. Alexander's smile was predatory. What I've always wanted, Jessica, control of this company, and you're going to help me get it. And why would I do that, Jessica asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Alexander leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his eyes hard. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows about your part in all this. How you've known about these crimes for days and said nothing. How you've been complicit in the cover-up. Jessica felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. That's not true, she protested weakly. Isn't it? Alexander's voice was silky smooth. You've known for days, Jessica. You've continued to work here, to profit from this company. In the eyes of the law, that makes you just as guilty as my father. The realization hit Jessica like a physical blow. Alexander was right. By not immediately reporting what she had found, she had made herself an accomplice. She had been so focused on trying to find the right way to handle the situation that she hadn't considered how her inaction might be perceived. What do you want me to do? She asked, hating the defeat in her voice. Alexander's smile widened. It's simple, really. You're going to give me those documents, all of them. And then you're going to help me take control of this company. Jessica's mind raced, searching for a way out. And what about your father? What happens to him? Alexander waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about dear old Dad. He'll be taken care of. A comfortable retirement, perhaps, or maybe a nice long vacation somewhere without extradition laws." The casual cruelty in Alexander's voice made Jessica's stomach churn. This was Marcus's son, planning to betray his own father without a hint of remorse. In that moment, Jessica realized that as flawed as Marcus might be, Alexander was something far worse. "I need time to think," Jessica said, trying to buy herself some space. Alexander stood, straightening his impeccable suit. "Of course, take all the time you need, but remember, Jessica, the clock is ticking. If those documents become public, we all go down. And I promise you I'll make sure you fall the hardest." With that, he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a soft finality that made Jessica shudder. She sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours, her mind a chaotic whirl of thoughts and emotions. What was she to do? Betray Marcus, the man who had given her everything, to his scheming son? Go public with the information and watch as the company she had dedicated her life to crumbled? Or stay silent, becoming more complicit with each passing day? As the first rays of dawn began to filter through her office window, Jessica made a decision. She couldn't handle this alone. She needed to dig deeper to understand the full scope of what she was dealing with. With trembling hands, she reached for her computer, beginning a meticulous investigation into the documents she had found. Little did she know, her search for the truth was about to uncover something far more personal and devastating than she could have ever imagined. As she delved deeper into the company's dark secrets, Jessica was unwittingly setting in motion a chain of events that would not only shake the foundations of Blackwood Corporation, but would also force her to confront painful truths about her own past. The turning point had arrived, and there was no going back. The choices Jessica would make in the coming days would not only determine the fate of Blackwood Corporation, but would also shape the course of her own life forever. Jessica's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning through countless documents, emails, and financial records. The more she uncovered, the more her heart sank. The corruption within Blackwood Corporation ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. One particular project caught her attention: Operation Green Shield. It was touted publicly as a revolutionary environmental initiative designed to create sustainable energy solutions for underdeveloped areas. The reality, however, was far more sinister. As Jessica dug deeper, she discovered a trail of emails and memos detailing how Blackwood Corporation had knowingly dumped toxic waste in a poor, rural community under the guise of building a green power plant. The company had falsified environmental impact reports, bribed local officials, and silenced anyone who tried to speak out. The scope of the disaster was staggering. Hundreds of families had been affected, their land poisoned, their water contaminated. Cancer rates in the area had skyrocketed, but Blackwood's army of lawyers had managed to keep any lawsuits from gaining traction. Jessica felt physically ill as she read through medical reports of children born with severe birth defects, of entire families devastated by mysterious illnesses. And all of this had been hidden behind a facade of corporate philanthropy and environmental stewardship. She thought back to all the times she had proudly spoken about Blackwood's commitment to sustainability, all the awards the company had won for its green initiatives. The hypocrisy was overwhelming. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light through her office window, Jessica sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. She had always believed in the power of business to do good, had seen Blackwood as a shining example of corporate responsibility. Now that belief lay shattered at her feet. The ethical dilemma before her seemed insurmountable. On one hand, she had a loyalty to Marcus, the man who had given her everything. On the other, she couldn't ignore the suffering caused by the company's actions. And looming over it all was Alexander's threat, the specter of her own complicity in these crimes. Jessica knew she needed to act, but every potential course of action seemed fraught with danger and moral compromise. Going public would bring justice to those harmed by Blackwood's actions, but it would also destroy the company, leaving thousands unemployed. Staying silent meant allowing the victims to continue suffering without recourse. And then there was Alexander's proposal. The thought of handing over the evidence to him made Jessica's skin crawl. She had no doubt that he would use it not to right the company's wrongs, but to further his own ambitions, likely continuing the very practices that had caused so much harm. As she grappled with these impossible choices, Jessica couldn't help but think of her own past. She had been one of the lucky ones, plucked from a life of hardship by Marcus's generosity. How many others, she wondered, had been less fortunate? How many had suffered because of the very success she had benefited from? The weight of this realization was crushing. Jessica had always prided herself on her integrity, on doing what was right. But now, faced with the stark reality of the situation, she realized that she had been complicit in a system that valued profit over people, that sacrificed the vulnerable for the benefit of the powerful. As the office began to come to life around her, the sounds of arriving employees filtering through her door, Jessica made a decision. She couldn't tackle this alone. She needed help, someone she could trust to guide her through the moral minefield she found herself in. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone. There was one person she knew who had the legal expertise and moral compass to help her navigate this crisis: Sarah Chen, a former Blackwood lawyer who had left the company under mysterious circumstances years ago. Jessica had always admired Sarah's integrity, and now she hoped that admiration hadn't been misplaced. As the phone rang, Jessica took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. Little did she know this call would set in motion a chain of events that would not only expose the full extent of Blackwood's corruption, but would also uncover a shocking truth about her own past. The phone clicked as Sarah answered. "Hello?" Jessica's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "Sarah? It's Jessica Parker from Blackwood. I need your help. It's urgent." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was cautious. "Jessica, what's this about?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," Jessica said, glancing nervously at her office door. "But I've discovered something big. About Blackwood, about Marcus. I don't know who else to turn to." Another pause, longer this time. When Sarah finally responded, her tone was resigned, as if she had been expecting this call for years. "I see. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th and Pine in an hour. Come alone and make sure you're not followed." As Jessica hung up the phone, she felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She was taking the first step towards exposing the truth, but she knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and difficult choices. As Jessica made her way to the coffee shop, her mind raced with the implications of what she had discovered. The bustling city streets felt alien to her now, as if the world had shifted on its axis. Every passing face seemed to hold a secret, every glance in her direction a potential threat. She arrived at the cafe early, choosing a secluded booth in the back. Her hands shook slightly as she ordered a coffee, her eyes constantly darting to the door. When Sarah finally walked in, Jessica almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the polished corporate lawyer she remembered. In her place was a woman who looked older than her years, her face lined with worry and her eyes holding a weariness that spoke of battles fought and lost. "Jessica," Sarah said, sliding into the booth. "It's been a long time." Jessica nodded, struggling to find the right words. "Sarah, I don't even know where to begin." Sarah's expression softened. "Start at the beginning. Tell me everything." And so Jessica did. She told Sarah about the documents she had found, about Marcus's reaction, about Alexander's threats. As she spoke, she watched Sarah's expression change from concern to anger to a deep, abiding sadness. When Jessica finally finished, Sarah was silent for a long moment. "I always knew this day would come," she said finally. "I just hoped it wouldn't be you who had to bear this burden." Jessica leaned forward. "What do you mean? Did you know about all of this?" Sarah sighed heavily. I suspected. It's why I left Blackwood. I couldn't prove anything, but I saw enough to know that something wasn't right. But Jessica, what you've uncovered, it's far worse than I ever imagined. What should I do? Sarah Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't just ignore this, but if I come forward, it will destroy everything. The company, Marcus, all the good we've done. Sarah reached across the table, taking Jessica's hand in hers. Jessica, listen to me. The good that Blackwood has done doesn't erase the harm it's caused. Those people, that community, they deserve justice. Jessica nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. I know, but how? If I go public, Alexander will make sure I take the fall. And even if he doesn't, how can I betray Marcus like that, after everything he's done for me? Sarah's expression hardened. Marcus made his choices, Jessica. He's not the man you thought he was. And as for Alexander, she trailed off, her eyes distant. He's dangerous, more dangerous than you know. Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Sarah hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. There's something you need to see, something I've been working on for years, but not here. It's not safe. As they left the cafe, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Sarah led her through a series of back alleys and side streets, eventually arriving at a small, nondescript apartment building. Sarah's apartment was spartanly furnished, but every available surface was covered in papers, files, and photographs. As Jessica looked closer, she realized that everything was related to Blackwood Corporation. What is all this? She asked, her voice hushed. Sarah moved to a locked cabinet, retrieving a thick file. This is everything I've managed to gather over the years. Financial records, witness statements, environmental reports. It's not enough to bring down Blackwood on its own, but combined with what you found. Jessica leafed through the file, her heart sinking with each page she turned. The corruption ran deeper than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just one community that had been affected, there were similar stories from all over the world. My God, she whispered, how could Marcus do this? How could he live with himself? Sarah's voice was gentle. Power corrupts, Jessica, and Marcus. He's been corrupted for a very long time. As Jessica continued to read, one name kept appearing in the documents, a name she didn't recognize. Who's Elena Rossi? She asked. Sarah froze, her face paling. Where did you see that name? Jessica pointed to several documents. She's mentioned here and here. It looks like she was trying to expose Blackwood's activities in Italy about 25 years ago, but then she just disappears from the records. Sarah sank into a chair, her face in her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. Elena Rossi was a journalist. She was investigating Blackwood's operations in a small Italian town. She was my friend. Jessica felt a sense of dread settling over her. What happened to her? Sarah's voice was barely audible. She disappeared. Her body was found in the river a week later. The local police ruled it an accident, but Jessica felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. You think Blackwood was responsible? Sarah nodded. I could never prove it, but yes. And Jessica, there's something else you need to know about Elena. Jessica braced herself, sensing that whatever Sarah was about to say would change everything. Sarah took a deep breath. Elena had a daughter, a baby girl. After Elena died, the child disappeared. For years I tried to find out what happened to her, but it was like she vanished into thin air. Jessica felt a strange sensation, as if the pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed were suddenly falling into place. Sarah, she said, her voice shaking. Why are you telling me this? Sarah's eyes met Jessica's, filled with a mixture of sorrow and resolution. Because, Jessica, I think that child was you. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jessica gripped the edge of the table, her mind reeling. No, she whispered, that's not possible. I was in foster care. Marcus adopted me. Sarah nodded. Yes, you were in foster care. But have you ever wondered why there are no records of your birth parents? Why Marcus, a man with no connection to the foster system, suddenly decided to adopt a teenage girl? Jessica's mind raced, memories flooding back. The gaps in her early childhood that she had never been able to fill. The nightmares of dark water that had plagued her for years. The inexplicable feeling of connection she had felt when visiting Italy on a business trip. It can't be, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew in her heart that it was true. Sarah reached into the file, pulling out an old photograph. It showed a young woman, her face alight with laughter, holding a baby in her arms. The woman's eyes, warm and full of life, were startlingly familiar. Jessica had seen them every day of her life in the mirror. "This is the last photo taken of Elena and her daughter Sarah," said softly, "before everything went wrong." Jessica stared at the photo, tears streaming down her face. All her life, she had wondered about her origins, had felt a piece of herself missing. And now, in this moment of crisis, the truth had finally come to light. She looked up at Sarah, her voice barely a whisper. "What do I do now?" Sarah's eyes were filled with compassion, but her voice was firm. "You do what your mother would have wanted. You expose the truth, no matter the cost." As the weight of this revelation settled over her, Jessica knew that her path forward was clear. The choices she faced were no longer just about right and wrong, about loyalty and betrayal. They were about justice, about honoring the mother she had never known, and about becoming the person she was always meant to be. With a deep breath, Jessica straightened her shoulders. "Tell me everything," she said. "I need to know it all." And as Sarah began to speak, Jessica listened with a newfound determination. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and hard choices, but for the first time since this ordeal began, she felt a sense of purpose. She would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. She would bring justice to those who had suffered, including her own mother. The story of Blackwood Corporation was far from over. In fact, Jessica realized it was only just beginning. The Blackwood Tower loomed before Jessica as she approached, its glass and steel facade no longer a symbol of progress and innovation, but a monument to corruption and deceit. Her heart raced as she stepped into the elevator, her mind replaying the conversation with Sarah over and over. As the elevator ascended, Jessica couldn't help but feel as though she was rising to meet her fate. The weight of the truth she now carried threatened to crush her, but she steeled herself, drawing strength from the memory of the mother she had never known. The doors opened to reveal the executive floor, eerily quiet in the early morning hours. Jessica made her way to Marcus's office, each step feeling like a mile. As she reached for the door handle, she paused, taking a deep breath. "If you're watching this unfold," she whispered, as if addressing an unseen audience, "remember that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that define us." She pushed open the door to find Marcus already there, poring over documents spread across his desk. He looked up, his face a mask of exhaustion and worry. "Jessica," he said, his voice hoarse, "I've been expecting you." Jessica stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk, Marcus, about everything." Marcus nodded slowly, gesturing for her to sit. "I suppose we do. I take it you've been doing some digging." "I know about Operation Green Shield," Jessica said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know about the cover-ups, the bribes, the people who've been hurt, and I know about Elena Rossi." Marcus's face paled at the mention of Elena's name. He slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. "How much do you know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know she was my mother," Jessica replied, her voice catching slightly. "I know she was trying to expose Blackwood's illegal activities in Italy, and I know she died because of it." Marcus closed his eyes, pain etched across his features. When he opened them again, they were filled with unshed tears. "Jessica, you have to understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "Elena, she wouldn't back down. We tried to reason with her, to make her see the bigger picture." Jessica felt a surge of anger. The bigger picture. You're talking about my mother's life. Marcus held up a hand, his voice pleading. I know, it's unforgivable. But you have to believe me, I never wanted her to die. When I found out what happened, I was devastated. I knew I had to do something, to make it right somehow. So you adopted me, Jessica said, the pieces finally falling into place, to ease your guilty conscience. But Marcus nodded, shame written across his face. At first, yes. But Jessica, you have to believe me when I say that I grew to love you as my own. Everything I've done since then, all the good we've accomplished with Blackwood, it was to try and balance the scales. Jessica felt tears stinging her eyes. But it doesn't balance, Marcus. All the charity work, all the innovations, they don't erase the harm that's been done, the lives that have been ruined. Before Marcus could respond, the office door burst open. Alexander strode in, his face a mask of fury. What the hell is going on here, he demanded. Jessica and Marcus both stood, tension filling the room. Alexander's eyes darted between them, suspicion growing in his gaze. Have you told her everything, Father? About how you built this empire on lies and bodies? Marcus's face hardened. That's enough, Alexander. You don't know what you're talking about. Alexander laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, I know more than you think. I know about Elena Rossi. I know about all the others you've silenced over the years. Did you really think you could keep it all hidden forever? Jessica felt as though she was watching a tennis match, her head swiveling between father and son. You knew, she asked Alexander. All this time you knew. Alexander's smile was cold. Of course I knew. I've been waiting for the right moment to use it. And now, thanks to you, Jessica, that moment has come. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. I've just sent copies of all the incriminating documents to the board of directors and the media. It's over, Father. Your reign ends today. Marcus lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bastard, after everything I've done for you. As the two men grappled, Jessica found herself frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. She wanted to intervene, to stop the madness unfolding before her, but her body refused to move. Suddenly a new voice cut through the chaos. That's enough? All three turned to see Sarah Chen standing in the doorway, flanked by two police officers. Marcus Blackwood, Alexander Blackwood, you're both under arrest for fraud, environmental violations, and conspiracy to commit murder. As the officers moved to restrain Marcus and Alexander, Jessica felt a surreal sense of detachment, as if she was watching a movie unfold. She turned to Sarah, her voice shaking. How? How did you know to come? Sarah's smile was grim. I've been working with the authorities for years, building a case. When you came to me with your evidence, it was the final piece we needed. I'm sorry for not telling you earlier, but we couldn't risk tipping them off. As Marcus and Alexander were led away in handcuffs, both shouting protestations and threats, Jessica sank into a chair, her mind reeling. She looked up at Sarah, feeling lost. What happens now? Sarah sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Now we tell the truth, all of it. It won't be easy, Jessica. The company will likely collapse. There will be investigations, trials. But the people who have been hurt by Blackwood's actions will finally see justice. Jessica nodded slowly, a strange sense of calm settling over her. She turned to Sarah, her voice steady. You know, in moments like these, I wish life had a rewind button, a chance to go back and make different choices. But I suppose that's not how it works, is it? Sarah shook her head, a sad smile on her face. No, it's not. But we do have the power to shape what happens next, to learn from the past and build a better future. As they sat there, watching the sunrise through the office windows, Jessica felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was truly honoring her mother's memory. She turned to Sarah, her voice filled with determination. "I want to tell my mother's story, to make sure everyone knows what she fought for and what she died for." Sarah squeezed her hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea, and I'll be right there with you every step of the way." As they left the office, Jessica paused, looking back at the space that had been her second home for so many years. "To anyone who's been following this story," she said softly, as if addressing an unseen audience, "remember that the truth always finds a way to come to light. It's up to us to have the courage to face it when it does." In the days and weeks that followed, the Blackwood scandal dominated headlines worldwide. The company's stock plummeted, and thousands of employees found themselves suddenly out of work. But amidst the chaos and uncertainty, a new movement began to emerge. Led by Jessica and Sarah, a coalition of former Blackwood employees, environmental activists, and community leaders came together to address the damage done by the company's actions. They established a fund to help those affected by environmental contamination, launched initiatives to retrain displaced workers, and advocated for stricter corporate accountability laws. Jessica found herself at the center of a media storm, but she embraced the opportunity to share her mother's story and to shed light on the dark underbelly of corporate greed. In interviews and public speeches, she often found herself addressing the public directly, as if speaking to each individual watching or reading her words. "If you're following this story," she would say, "ask yourself, what kind of world do we want to live in? One where profit comes before people, or one where businesses are held accountable for their actions? The choice is ours to make." As the legal proceedings against Marcus and Alexander Blackwood dragged on, Jessica focused her energy on healing and rebuilding. She reached out to the communities affected by Blackwood's actions, listening to their stories and working tirelessly to find ways to make amends. One day, as she stood before a group of former Blackwood employees outlining plans for a new, ethically run company that would prioritize sustainability and community involvement, Jessica felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. "We have the power to rewrite this story," she told the assembled crowd, "to take the lessons learned from Blackwood's fall and use them to build something better. If you're with me, if you believe in this vision, then let's work together to make it a reality." The response was overwhelming. As people came forward to offer their support and ideas, Jessica felt a surge of hope. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As she left the meeting, energized by the possibilities ahead, Jessica paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. "Mum," she whispered, "I hope I'm making you proud." And somewhere in the gentle breeze that ruffled her hair and the warm sunlight on her face, Jessica felt a sense of peace, as if her mother's spirit was there, watching over her. The story of Blackwood Corporation had come to an end, but Jessica's story and the story of all those affected by corporate greed and corruption was just beginning. And as she stepped forward into her new role as an advocate for corporate responsibility and environmental justice, Jessica knew that every choice, every action would be a tribute to the mother she had lost and the legacy she was now determined to build. "To everyone who's been part of this journey," she said, her voice carrying across the square, "remember that change starts with us, with the choices we make every day. So let's make them count." And with those words, Jessica Parker stepped into her future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she carried with her the strength of her mother's spirit and the power of truth. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as Jessica took the stand. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the sea of faces, journalists scribbling furiously, former Blackwood employees watching with a mix of anger and hope, and in the back, Sarah Chen offering a reassuring nod. At the defendant's table sat Marcus and Alexander Blackwood, both looking haggard and defeated. Marcus caught Jessica's eye for a moment, his face a mask of regret and sorrow. Alexander, on the other hand, glared at her with undisguised hatred. As the prosecutor began his questioning, Jessica took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She recounted everything: the discovery of the documents, the revelations about Operation Green Shield, and the shocking truth about her own identity and her mother's fate. With each word, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, but the relief was bittersweet. The story she told was one of betrayal, greed, and lost innocence. It was the unraveling of everything she had believed in, everything she had worked for. "Miss Parker," the prosecutor said, his voice cutting through her thoughts, "can you tell the court about the extent of the environmental damage caused by Blackwood Corporation's actions?" Jessica nodded, her voice steady as she began to detail the devastation she had witnessed. She spoke of polluted rivers, of children born with debilitating illnesses, of entire ecosystems destroyed in the name of profit. As she talked, she could see the horror dawning on the faces of the jurors. "And how did the company respond to these issues when they were brought to light?" the prosecutor pressed. Jessica's gaze flicked to Marcus for a moment before she answered. "They buried it. They silenced whistleblowers, manipulated data, bribed officials, anything to keep the truth from coming out." The cross-examination was brutal. Marcus and Alexander's high-priced lawyers tried to paint Jessica as a disgruntled employee, an opportunist looking to make a name for herself. They questioned her motives, her credibility, even her sanity. But Jessica held firm. With each attack, she found herself growing stronger, more resolute. She had nothing left to lose, nothing left to hide. The truth was her armor, and she wielded it like a sword. As the trial dragged on for weeks, the public fallout was catastrophic. Blackwood Corporation stock plummeted to near worthless levels. Long-time investors jumped ship, and clients cancelled contracts en masse. The once mighty corporation was crumbling before the world's eyes. Outside the courtroom, Jessica found herself thrust into the spotlight. Reporters hounded her for statements, activists lauded her as a hero, and former colleagues alternately praised and vilified her. The pressure was immense, and there were nights when Jessica lay awake, doubting every decision she had made. But through it all, Sarah remained a steady presence, offering guidance and support. "You're doing the right thing," she would remind Jessica in moments of doubt. Elena would be proud. The verdict, when it finally came, was unanimous. Marcus and Alexander Blackwood were found guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was harsh: decades in prison and billions in fines and restitution. As the gavel fell, sealing the fate of the Blackwood Empire, a hush fell over the courtroom. Jessica felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, sadness, a strange sense of emptiness. It was over, but the cost had been enormous. In the days that followed, the full impact of the verdict became clear. Blackwood Corporation, once a global powerhouse, was no more. Thousands of employees found themselves suddenly jobless. Pension funds that had invested heavily in Blackwood stock were decimated. The economic ripple effects were felt across industries and borders. Jessica watched in dismay as the company she had once loved, once believed in, was dismantled piece by piece. Buildings were sold off, assets liquidated, the iconic Blackwood logo disappearing from skylines around the world. But perhaps the most painful consequence was the human cost. Jessica received countless messages from former colleagues, people who had lost their livelihoods, their savings, their sense of purpose. Many blamed her for the company's downfall, their anger and fear palpable even through impersonal emails and text messages. One particularly difficult encounter came when Jessica ran into her former assistant, Michael, at a local coffee shop. The young man who had once looked up to her with admiration now regarded her with a mix of betrayal and resignation. "I hope it was worth it," Michael said, his voice bitter. "Bringing down the company, destroying so many lives. Does it make you feel like a hero?" Jessica felt the words like a physical blow. "Michael, I never wanted this. I was just trying to do the right thing." Michael's laugh was hollow. "The right thing? Tell that to the thousands of people who are out of work. Tell that to the communities that relied on Blackwood for their economy. Your right thing has caused more harm than good." As he walked away, leaving Jessica standing alone in the bustling cafe, she felt the full weight of her actions crushing down on her. The truth had come out, justice had been served, but at what cost? That night, as she sat in her apartment, no longer the luxurious penthouse provided by Blackwood, but a modest one-bedroom she could barely afford, Jessica found herself questioning everything. Had she made the right choice? Had exposing the truth been worth the collateral damage? She thought of her mother, Elena Rossi, who had given her life in pursuit of the truth. Would she have approved of Jessica's actions? Or would she have found a way to expose the corruption without causing so much destruction? As dawn broke, Jessica made a decision. She couldn't undo what had been done, but perhaps she could still make something positive out of the ashes of Blackwood Corporation. With renewed determination, she reached out to Sarah Chen. Together, they began to formulate a plan. They would use the skills and connections they had gained at Blackwood to create something new, a foundation dedicated to corporate accountability and environmental restoration. It wouldn't be easy. They would face skepticism, resistance, and the monumental task of rebuilding trust. But as Jessica looked out at the city skyline, no longer dominated by the Blackwood Tower, she felt a glimmer of hope. The fall of Blackwood Corporation had been a tragedy in many ways, but perhaps, just perhaps, it could also be the catalyst for real, lasting change, and Jessica was determined to be at the forefront of that change, no matter the personal cost. As she turned away from the window, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Jessica couldn't help but feel that this was not the end of her story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter of redemption, of rebuilding, and of honoring the legacy of those who had sacrificed everything in the pursuit of truth. As Jessica and Sarah worked tirelessly to establish their new foundation, an unexpected ally emerged from the shadows of the Blackwood scandal. Rebecca Winters, a former board member of Blackwood Corporation, reached out to Jessica with information that would change everything. "I've been following your story, Ms. Parker," Rebecca said, her voice tense over the phone. "There's something you need to know, something that could turn this whole situation on its head." Intrigued and wary, Jessica agreed to meet Rebecca at a discreet cafe on the outskirts of the city. As she waited, her mind raced with possibilities. What more could there possibly be to uncover? Rebecca arrived, looking nothing like the polished executive Jessica remembered from Blackwood board meetings. She was haggard, nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be followed. "I've been holding on to this information for years," Rebecca began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was too afraid to come forward before, but after seeing your courage, I can't stay silent any longer." With trembling hands, Rebecca passed a USB drive to Jessica. "This contains evidence of Alexander's own illegal activities. Activities that his father knew nothing about." Jessica's eyes widened. "What kind of activities?" Rebecca's voice was grim. Money laundering, insider trading, even connections to organized crime. Alexander wasn't just complicit in Blackwood's misdeeds, he was running his own criminal empire right under everyone's noses. As Jessica plugged the drive into her laptop, the true extent of Alexander's deceit unfolded before her eyes. Financial records, incriminating emails, even surveillance footage, it was all there, painting a picture of corruption that went far beyond anything she had imagined. "Why are you showing me this now?" Jessica asked, her voice shaking. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Because I can't live with the guilt anymore. And because I believe you're the only one who can make this right." As Rebecca left, disappearing into the crowded street, Jessica sat stunned, the weight of this new information settling heavily on her shoulders. She immediately called Sarah, her voice urgent. "We need to meet. Now." Hours later, as they pored over the evidence in Sarah's apartment, the full implications began to sink in. Alexander hadn't just been aware of Blackwood's crimes, he had been actively working to undermine the company for his own gain. "This changes everything," Sarah said, her voice filled with a mix of shock and excitement. We need to take this to the authorities immediately." But Jessica hesitated. "Wait, if we do that, we're just continuing the cycle of destruction. More jobs lost, more lives ruined. There has to be another way." Sarah looked at her quizzically. "What are you thinking?" Jessica's mind was racing. What if? What if we could use this information to rebuild instead of destroy? To create something positive out of all this mess? Over the next few days, Jessica and Sarah worked around the clock, formulating a plan that seemed almost too audacious to be real. They reached out to their contacts in the business world, in law enforcement, in environmental agencies. Slowly, carefully, they began to put the pieces in place. When they finally felt ready, they made their move. But instead of going to the press or the prosecutors, they went straight to the source. They requested a meeting with Alexander Blackwood himself. The prison visiting room was cold and sterile, a far cry from the luxurious offices Alexander had once inhabited. When he saw Jessica and Sarah enter, his face contorted with rage. "Come to gloat," he spat. "Haven't you done enough damage?" Jessica sat down across from him, her face impassive. "We're not here to gloat, Alexander. We're here to offer you a choice." She laid out the evidence they had gathered, watching as the color drained from Alexander's face. "We know everything," she said quietly. "Every illegal deal, every dirty secret." Alexander's bravado crumbled. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Jessica leaned forward. "We want you to make things right, to use your knowledge, your connections, to help us rebuild what Blackwood destroyed." Alexander laughed bitterly. "And why would I do that?" "Because it's your only chance at redemption," Sarah interjected. "Your only chance to leave a legacy that's not tainted by crime and corruption." For a long moment, Alexander was silent, his eyes darting between Jessica and Sarah. Finally, he spoke. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jessica outlined their plan: a new company built on the ashes of Blackwood, but with a fundamentally different ethos. A company dedicated to cleaning up the environmental messes Blackwood had left behind, to providing sustainable solutions to the communities they had once exploited. "You have the knowledge, the connections," Jessica said. "Help us make this work, and we'll advocate for a reduction in your sentence. More importantly, you'll have a chance to be part of something good, something meaningful." Alexander's laugh was hollow. "You really think it's that simple? That we can just start over?" Sarah's voice was firm. "No, we don't think it's simple. We know it will be incredibly hard. But it's the right thing to do, and deep down I think you know that." As they left the prison that day, Jessica felt a glimmer of hope. Alexander hadn't agreed outright, but she had seen something in his eyes, a flicker of the man he could have been, might still become. Over the next few weeks, a flurry of activity ensued. Jessica and Sarah worked tirelessly, negotiating with investors, liaising with environmental experts, drafting proposals for community engagement. Slowly but surely, their vision began to take shape. And then, just as they were beginning to gain momentum, another unexpected development rocked their world. Marcus Blackwood, still serving his sentence, reached out through his lawyers. He wanted to meet. The reunion between Jessica and Marcus was fraught with emotion. Gone was the powerful, charismatic man she had once known. In his place sat a broken figure, aged beyond his years by guilt and regret. "I've had a lot of time to think," Marcus said, his voice rough. "About the choices I made, the people I hurt. I can never undo the damage I've done, but I want to help make things right." Jessica listened as Marcus outlined his proposal. He wanted to liquidate his remaining personal assets, properties, investments, art collections, and put everything into the new venture. More than that, he offered his expertise, his industry knowledge, to help guide the fledgling company. As she left the prison that day, Jessica's mind was reeling. The idea of working with Marcus again, of trusting him, seemed almost unthinkable. And yet, the resources he offered could make all the difference in their efforts to create real, lasting change. Back at their makeshift office, Jessica and Sarah debated long into the night. The ethical implications were complex, the potential pitfalls numerous. But in the end, they came to a decision. "We'll accept Marcus's offer," Jessica announced to their small team the next morning. "But with conditions: complete transparency, no executive power, and a board of ethics to oversee every decision." As word of their plan spread, reactions were mixed. Some hailed it as a bold step towards corporate responsibility, others decried it as naive at best, dangerously misguided at worst. But Jessica remained resolute. Standing before a crowd of journalists, former Blackwood employees, and skeptical investors, she made her case. "We can't change the past," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But we can learn from it. We can use the lessons of Blackwood's fall to build something better. Something that serves not just shareholders but communities, environments, and future generations." As she spoke, Jessica felt a surge of emotion. She thought of her mother, Elena Rossi, whose quest for truth had set this all in motion. She thought of the communities devastated by Blackwood's actions, of the employees who had lost everything. And she thought of the future, a future they now had a chance to shape. "This won't be easy," she concluded. "We'll face challenges, setbacks, and criticism. But I believe that together we can turn this tragedy into an opportunity for real, lasting change." As applause filled the room, Jessica caught Sarah's eye. They shared a smile, both knowing that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of genuine hope. The story of Blackwood Corporation was far from over. But perhaps, just perhaps, its darkest chapter was giving way to a new dawn. 5 years had passed since the fall of Blackwood Corporation, and the world had changed in ways Jessica Parker could never have imagined. The new company, Phoenix Sustainable Solutions, had risen from the ashes of Blackwood, its mission to repair the damage done and create a new model of corporate responsibility. Jessica stood at the window of her office, looking out over the city. The skyline was different now, the imposing Blackwood Tower replaced by a series of green buildings, each one a testament to sustainable architecture and renewable energy. It wasn't just the physical landscape that had changed, there was a new spirit in the air, a sense of purpose and hope that had been lacking in the cutthroat corporate world of before. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Sarah Chen entered, a tablet in hand and a smile on her face. "The latest reports from the cleanup project in Brazil just came in," she said. "We're ahead of schedule and under budget. The local communities are thrilled with the progress." Jessica felt a surge of pride. It hadn't been easy, but they were making a real difference. "And how are things going with the retraining program?" she asked. Sarah's smile widened. "Even better than we hoped. 90% of the former Blackwood employees who entered the program are now employed in green tech industries. Some have even started their own sustainable businesses." As they discussed the various projects underway, Jessica marveled at how far they had come. The early days had been tough, filled with skepticism and setbacks. Many had doubted that a company built on the ruins of a corrupt empire could ever truly change things. But slowly, project by project, success by success, they had proven the doubters wrong. Marcus Blackwood, now released from prison, had kept his word. He had turned over his personal fortune to the company and served as an advisor, his expertise proving invaluable in navigating the complex world of international business. He never sought the limelight, content to work behind the scenes to make amends for his past actions. Alexander Blackwood's story had taken a different turn. After initially resisting, he had eventually embraced the chance for redemption. His insider knowledge of corporate malfeasance had been crucial in developing Phoenix's stringent ethical guidelines. Now he led the company's anti-corruption task force, using his experience to help other corporations clean up their acts. As Jessica and Sarah wrapped up their meeting, another visitor arrived. Michael, Jessica's former assistant at Blackwood, now headed Phoenix's community outreach program. The years had softened the anger and betrayal he had once felt towards Jessica, replaced by a shared commitment to their new mission. "We've got a situation in the Appalachian project," Michael said, his face serious. "Some of the local residents are pushing back against the cleanup efforts. They're worried about losing jobs in the coal industry." Jessica nodded, understanding the complexity of the issue. "Set up a town hall meeting," she said. "We need to listen to their concerns and show them how our green energy initiatives can create even more jobs in the long run." As Michael left to make the arrangements, Jessica turned to Sarah. "Want to take a field trip?" she asked with a smile. "I think it's time we paid a visit to Appalachia ourselves." Hours later, they were on a small private plane, electric. Of course, Phoenix practiced what it preached, heading towards the mountains. As they flew over the landscape, Jessica could see the scars left by years of mining and industrial waste. But she could also see signs of hope: new forests growing where there had once been bare earth, clean rivers where polluted streams had run. The town hall meeting was tense at first. The residents were skeptical, having heard promises of progress and prosperity from corporations before. But as Jessica and Sarah laid out their plans, showing concrete examples of how Phoenix had revitalized other communities, the mood began to shift. An older man stood up, his face weathered by years of hard work in the mines. "My daddy was a miner, and his daddy before him," he said. "What you're proposing, it's a big change. How can we trust that you won't just up and leave once you've gotten what you want, like all the others?" Jessica met his gaze steadily. "Because we're not like the others," she said. "We're here for the long haul. Our success is tied to your success. If this community thrives, we thrive. If it fails, we fail. We're all in this together." She went on to explain Phoenix's unique profit-sharing model, where a significant portion of the company's earnings went directly back into the communities they worked with. She talked about their commitment to local hiring and training, ensuring that the jobs created would go to those who needed them most. As the meeting went on, Jessica could feel the mood in the room changing. Where there had been suspicion, now there was cautious optimism. By the end of the night, many of the residents were eager to learn more about how they could be part of the transformation. Back at their hotel, Jessica and Sarah reflected on the day's events. "It's not going to be easy," Sarah said. Changing minds, changing that entire way of life. It's a huge undertaking." Jessica nodded. "But it's worth it," she said. "This is why we started Phoenix, not just to clean up the messes of the past, but to create a better future." As they prepared to return home the next day, Jessica received an unexpected call. It was from a journalist she had worked with during the Blackwood scandal, someone who had been initially skeptical of Phoenix's mission. "I've been following your work," the journalist said. "I have to admit I didn't think you could pull it off. But what you're doing, it's remarkable. Would you be open to an in-depth piece about Phoenix? I want to show the world that there's a different way of doing business." Jessica agreed, feeling a sense of validation. They weren't just changing individual communities, they were changing the conversation about what corporations could and should be. In the months that followed, Phoenix's work in Appalachia became a model for their operations around the world. The story of a former mining town transitioning to a hub of green technology and sustainable industry captured the public's imagination. Other companies began to take notice, some reaching out to Phoenix for guidance on how they too could change their practices. On the 5th anniversary of Phoenix's founding, Jessica stood before a crowd of employees, partners, and community members. As she looked out at the sea of faces, she saw hope, pride, and determination. "5 years ago, we set out to prove that business could be a force for good," she began. "That we could create prosperity without destroying our planet or exploiting our fellow human beings. It hasn't been easy. We've faced challenges, setbacks, and plenty of skeptics. But look at what we've accomplished together." She gestured to the screens behind her, showing images of restored landscapes, thriving communities, and innovative green technologies. "This is just the beginning," she continued. "We have so much more to do, but I believe more strongly than ever that we are on the right path." As applause filled the room, Jessica felt a deep sense of peace. She thought of her mother, Elena Rossi, whose quest for truth had set this all in motion. She thought of Marcus and Alexander Blackwood, and the complex journey of redemption they had embarked upon. And she thought of all the lives touched and changed by Phoenix's work. The story of Blackwood Corporation had been one of greed, corruption, and destruction, but from its ashes, a new story was being written, a story of hope, renewal, and the power of collective action to create positive change. As Jessica left the stage, surrounded by well-wishers and congratulations, she knew that their work was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new battles to fight. But for the first time in a long time, she felt truly optimistic about the future. Phoenix Sustainable Solutions wasn't just a company, it was a movement, a catalyst for change in a world that desperately needed it. And as she looked out at the sunset painting the sky in brilliant hues, Jessica Parker smiled, ready to face whatever the future might bring. As Jessica concluded her speech at the 5th anniversary celebration of Phoenix Sustainable Solutions, she paused, her eyes scanning the crowd, her voice softened, filled with emotion. You know, there are moments when I wish I could reach through time and speak to my younger self, that scared, confused girl who uncovered the truth about Blackwood. I'd tell her that the path ahead is hard, but it's worth every step, that the pain and doubt she feels will forge her into someone stronger, someone capable of making real change. Her voice cracked slightly as she continued. And I wish I could speak to my mother, Elena Rossi. I'd tell her that her sacrifice wasn't in vain, that her courage ignited a flame that continues to burn bright, illuminating the darkest corners of corporate greed and inspiring a new generation to fight for what's right. Jessica's eyes glistened with unshed tears. To everyone here today, and to those watching from afar, remember that every small act of integrity, every stand against injustice, ripples out into the world in ways we can't always see. You may feel small, you may feel small, you may feel powerless, but your choices matter, your voice matters, you matter. She took a deep breath, her voice filled with quiet determination. In the darkest moments, when it seems like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, remember this: you are not alone. We are in this together, bound by our shared hope for a better tomorrow. And together, we can move mountains. As she finished, her final words resonated through the silent room. So let us go forward, not with fear, but with hope. Not with doubt, but with determination. For in our hands lies the power to shape the future, to heal the wounds of the past, and to create a world where justice, compassion, and sustainability are not just ideals, but realities. This is our moment. Let's make it count. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sound of quiet sniffles, as many in the audience were moved to tears by the raw emotion and powerful message of hope and collective responsibility. As Jessica stepped away from the podium, she paused and looked directly at the audience, her voice taking on a more intimate tone. You know, throughout this journey, I've often felt like I was speaking to an invisible audience, sharing our story with the world. And in a way I am, to those of you who followed our story, who've been with us through the ups and downs. I want to say thank you. Your support means more than you know. She smiled warmly, continuing. If this tale of corporate redemption and the power of integrity has touched you, I'd love to hear from you. It's as simple as leaving a comment with the number 1. And if you're curious about what's next for Phoenix and our mission, well, a comment with number 2 would let us know you're eager for the next chapter. Jessica's eyes twinkled with a hint of humor. Of course, if there are parts of our story you disagree with or aspects you think we could improve on, we're all ears. Your thoughts and critiques are what help us grow and do better. So please don't hesitate to share your opinions. Her voice took on a more serious note. Just as we at Phoenix believe in the power of collective action, I believe in the power of shared stories. If our journey has resonated with you, consider subscribing to this channel. It's like pressing that subscribe button on change itself. joining a community dedicated to making a difference. She concluded with a warm smile. Your support doesn't just mean the world to us, it helps us change the world. So let's continue this journey together, shall we? After all, the story of a better future is one we all write together.